Thank you for joining me here at 420 Colts Lane. I am your host, Nathan Lowry. Today we're going to be doing my predictions for the NFC North. This is a division that I absolutely have a lot of experience with. I grew up in a heavily Bears fan family. I am was the person who broke off and did the Colts thing, because that's who I am as a person. I do not follow the crowd. But I am very familiar with them. The 85 Bears was the team that got me into football. I think I was 5 years old. It was the first time I watched. I loved it, and obviously getting caught up in what the 85 Bears did gave me a lot of influence there as far as my future and loving the game of football. So a lot of appreciation there for the Bears, even though I am a Colts fan. I am not a Bears fan. I'm going to go ahead and start this off. At fourth place, I actually have the Green Bay Packers. A little surprising by that. I actually didn't go into this thinking I was going to pick the Packers, but after looking at everything, I have to say that I think it's very possible that they have slipped this far down, even though they still have Aaron Rodgers on their team. Aaron Rodgers is one of the best quarterbacks in the league. There is no doubt about it, although I think with injuries and then also it seems like maybe he's kind of losing his patience with the team a little bit. I know that they fired their head coach, and people think that was something that he had to do with. He didn't really get along with him. Felt like he wasn't allowed to make certain calls, those kind of things, or making good calls. I think Aaron Rodgers has got a little bit of an ego. He's kind of well documented about that. I think as he gets older, he's definitely losing a little bit of his skill set, and injuries are catching up with him. And further to the point, I believe that Aaron Rodgers is kind of the only thing on this team keeping that heart pumping. So if he's losing his touch, they have no chance. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and get into this. Last year they had 4,283 passing yards, 4 interceptions, 25 touchdowns. The interception obviously is good. The touchdowns could be a lot better. Yardage isn't terrible either. That's good. 3,752 allowed. And then they had 7 interceptions, so they definitely won that battle there. And 30 touchdowns given up. So they gave up more than they scored. You can't win that way. Rushing wise, 1,667, not tremendously great. 14 touchdowns. They allowed 1,918, so quite a bit more than they rushed for, and 15 touchdowns, so they lost that battle as well. In the draft, they got Rashard Gary, defensive end from Michigan. He could definitely turn into something. I think Michigan had quite a few good players, and this is at number 12 pick overall. I think maybe in the future he'll be good. I don't know how much of an impact he makes right away. Like I've said in previous videos, I think the defensive end is one of the hardest ones to gauge, along with quarterback, obviously. But some of them pan out, some of them don't. So we'll just have to wait and see. At 21, they've got Darrell Savage Jr., safety out of Maryland. I actually like this pick a lot. I think this is going to end up being a good pick. At what degree he affects the team in the first year, I don't know. But I think long term, this is definitely going to end up being somebody that they like. Number 44, you've got Elton Jenkins. I'm sure I messed that all up. And he is a guard slash center from Mississippi State. I was reading they obviously felt like they needed to dress their lines. I'm sorry, I didn't get into they had 44 sacks, and then they allowed 53. Whew, that's a lot. They actually got 44 sacks, which is pretty decent. 53 allowed. That's awful. Their line was awful, freaking terrible. So, anyways, what I was reading was yes, they were trying to make sure that they got top tackles, but they didn't end up getting in the top tackles, so they kind of took this guy for a guard, center slash center. I think that's just trying to boost that offensive line. If they weren't able to get a tackle, they'll boost it somewhere else. They definitely need to boost that line. Jace Sternberger at 75th overall. He's a tight end from Texas A&M. Okay. I guess, I'm sure that's a good pick. I don't know much about him. 150th overall, Kingsley Kiki. He's a defensive tackle from Texas A&M. 185 overall, looks like Kadar Hallman. He's a cornerback out of Toledo. I really don't think since I left Oklahoma I've seen anything about Toledo at all, so I don't really know. 194th overall, you got Dexter Williams. He's a running back out of Notre Dame. I am familiar with Notre Dame. This guy isn't going to blow your socks off. This is definitely a depth chart pick. This isn't going to end up being the starter. I don't believe in his skill set that much. But I'm sure that he'll be a serviceable backup at, he can plug in, I guess, third string, something like that. Yeah. 226 overall, we've got Ty Summers. He's an inside linebacker from TCU. I picked at 226. He's an inside linebacker at TCU. This is obviously a depth chart pick. We'll see how it all turns out. Free agency, Billy Turner, offensive lineman from the Broncos. Again, trying to bolster that offensive line that they desperately need. They desperately needed to do that. Zadarius Smith, outside linebacker from the Ravens. I actually like this pickup. I think this is a good pickup for them. They need help. Let's just face it, they kind of need help everywhere except for quarterback. I think that's. It was a good pickup, and they needed to plug. I think they got rid of Clay Matthews, anything that they can do to bolster that defense and add some pressure, I do think that he'll be able to be a decent addition to the team, and you should be able to see some productivity out of him. Adrian Amos, safety from the Bears. Again, I don't know that he's like a top tier player, but he's definitely a serviceable player, and with what they've already got on the team, I think he definitely can fit in there and make a bit of a difference and help a little bit. Preston Smith, again, outside linebacker from the Redskins. Again, I like this pickup. I like what they did in the free agency. Not so much in the draft. The draft seemed a little bit lackluster to me, especially with as many holes as they got and kind of the bleak future that they kind of face right now. So, anyways, yeah, I mean, very little in free agency that they did. I don't believe that this is a team that typically does much at all in free agency. I think this is just par for the course. This is actually probably more than they usually do. Key losses. Clay Matthews, outside linebacker, went to the Rams. Clay Matthews doesn't seem to be what he used to be, I don't think. He's obviously still a solid player. I think in the Rams defense, he's probably going to help out because they have so much going for them in the Rams. He can be a little bit of an older player, bring that experience and not be, have the whole defense relied on him. At one point in time, he was pretty much Green Bay's whole defense out there scrapping away, and he was a very good player. I think he has aged a little bit and kind of come down off that. Jake Ryan, inside linebacker, went to the Jacksonville, so they lost two linebackers. Randall Cobb, wide receiver to Dallas. Randall Cobb is, he's definitely a serviceable wide receiver, and when you pair him up with Aaron Rodgers, I think he probably outperformed a little bit. We'll see what he does in Dallas. Dallas has other wide receivers. This guy isn't going to be a keynote. But yeah, again, I kind of feel like I really didn't go into this thing thinking that I was going to put Green Bay at the fourth position, but I don't think that they did anything to really bolster their team that much. Again, added a little bit of influence there on the defense, but they also lost a little bit of influence as well. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference. It might make their defense a little bit better. Aaron Rodgers, he was dealing with some injuries and stuff like that. But he's aged, and he kind of looks aged to me. Obviously, he is a very good quarterback. He historically has been a very good quarterback, but 25 touchdowns, yeah, 4 interceptions. That's great. That's ball management. 4,238 passing yards. Again, that's solid. That's nothing to complain about. I think the touchdowns are probably where it's at. I don't think their wide receiving core is all that great, and they did pretty much absolutely nothing to bolster it. Even looking for key players to talk about in this, it was pretty much just Aaron Rodgers. When I was looking for pictures of them, something to put out there, it was pretty much just Aaron Rodgers. He's the team. As he goes, they go. I don't think that he's going to be enough to beat out any of the rest of these teams, if I'm being honest. And I do think this is where they're at, in the 4th position. It's weird to say that, but I think that is where they are. Now going into the 3rd, I have to put the Lions here. The Lions I actually thought was going to be 4th place. I don't have a lot of faith in the Lions. They obviously have Matthew Stafford. I think it's Stephen A. Smith that called him Matthew Statsford. He kind of seems to pad stats against lower end teams, but doesn't seem to be able to get the job done against higher end teams. I don't have a ton of love for Matthew Stafford. By the way, the Packers went 6-9-1 last year. That was their record. I didn't say that, so I want to make sure to say that. The Lions went 6-10. Very similar records there. They threw for 3,576 passing yards with 12 interceptions, 22 touchdowns. Not outstanding. They had 3,599 allowed while only picking off 7. 29 touchdowns. They definitely lost the battle in those areas. They had 660 yards rushing. It's not outstanding. 11 touchdowns. They gave up 761 and 11 touchdowns, so they pretty much lost every single battle there. 43 sacks with 41 allowed. Good for them. They won that battle. Let's see what they did in the draft. They got T.J. Hawkinson. I'm sure I messed that up. He is a tight end out of Iowa. I like this pick a lot. He is a good tight end, a really good tight end. This is at number 8 that they picked him, and I think obviously they need help scoring in the end zone, obviously. So having a big target like that, and he is good at catching the ball. I think Hawkinson's going to be a good addition to their team. He improves them a lot. Jaleni Tavia, pick number 43, and I will definitely mess that name up. He's a linebacker from Hawaii. When I read about this, people were kind of like, it's a stretch. It's a stretch to pick him that far up, but maybe they saw exactly what they wanted to see out of him. Maybe they knew exactly what they were looking at, and other people are missing on it. I'm not overly excited about that pick, but we'll have to see. He's a bigger guy. I think he was 250 pounds, 6'1", 250 pounds, so that's a lot. That's solid. And I think that he was, I want to say it was a 4.58 that he ran, which is, especially for that size, that's pretty good. So we'll have to see. Maybe he has a lot more talent that people just weren't recognizing. So 81 overall. Will Harris, DB out of Boston College. Reading about this kid, I do think that this is a very good pick as well. So far I am liking what they did in the draft. Austin Bryant, defensive end for Clemson, at 117. 146, Amane Druari. He's a cornerback from Penn State. 184th overall, Travis Fulgham. He's a wide receiver out of Old Dominion. I was reading about this guy, and he could have some extreme upside here. This definitely could be one of those picks that they find. And for the record, I just think Old Dominion is like one of the coolest names for any school. Old Dominion. It's Old Dominion. I wish that I went to a school called Old Dominion. That'd be cool. Old Dominion's awesome. Apparently he's the only second player ever to be drafted from Old Dominion, so they obviously have not had a lot of success. But yeah, reading about the kid, I do think that there's a lot of upside here. This could be somebody that comes in, especially at pick 184, and becomes a very, very good value pick. I like it. At 186, 2 picks later, Ty Johnson. He's a running back out of Maryland. Nothing there is going to blow your socks off, I don't think. 224 overall. Isaac Nata. He's a tight end from Georgia, so there they go, adding another depth chart there at tight end. I think they got a star at the first one with Hawkinson. This guy is obviously just depth chart, trying to compete for the third, fourth string there. 229, you got P.J. Johnson. He's a defensive tackle out of Arizona. Like I said, nothing to blow your socks off. Overall, I do like what the Lions did in their draft. Quite a few players I thought will add, especially long-term, add some to their team. Unfortunately, I don't necessarily trust that. There's been so many times I've looked at the Detroit Lions and said, hey, they look on paper like they got a really good team, and then they did jack crap. This is one of those teams that fool you a little bit. They kind of make you feel like you're doing good, and then they just don't do well. I do think they're going to be better than the Packers. All right, and free agency, they got Zach Zenner. He's a running back. It was a re-sign. Then Trey Flowers, edge from the Patriots. Absolutely love this. Love this pickup. First off, he's no longer on the Patriots. I love that. Second off, watching him, he's good. Flowers is good. This is good. This is really good. I like it. This is probably, of all of the free agency pickups in the league, with the exception of the people that came to our team, just because I love us, I think Trey Flowers was one of the best free agency pickups that there was. For the Lions, I think that's fantastic. Kudos for him. We'll see how that goes. Jesse James, tight end out of the Steelers. I actually like Jesse James. He didn't have a huge production numbers, but I think that he's going to have much better production in Detroit. They're obviously going to be running multi-set tight end sets with the way that they drafted and the way that they're going after in free agency. I think Jesse James has more than he's shown over in Pittsburgh, because Pittsburgh spreads the ball around. They obviously had an amazing wide receiving core with Juju and Antonio Brown. So I don't think that they necessarily relied on him as much as they could have, and as much as his skill set would allow. So I'd say the Lions need to look forward to Jesse James making a difference on their team. Justin Coleman, quarterback out of Seattle. Solid pick, I guess. Danny Amendola, wide receiver out of the Dolphins. He used to play for the Patriots. Danny's a solid wide receiver. He's not a monster wide receiver. He's not a top-notch wide receiver, but he is fairly consistent. And I think if you utilize him right, you're definitely going to get. He's a little slot receiver, a little speedy guy. Actually, I'm not sure that his speed is that great, but at any rate, he is a slot receiver. That's what he does. He contributes in the passing game. This is not going to be a number one wide receiver, but I could see him definitely making an impact on the team. O'Day Abushi is an offensive lineman from the Cardinals. I don't know too much about linemen, so I don't know. Andrew Adams, safety from the Bucks. Solid pick, I'm sure. Pick up Tommy Lee Lewis. He's a wide receiver, kick returner from the Saints. From what I read, that he's probably going to push in the kick return game. Might not have much to offer in the wide receiving, but they said that he does have some skill set there. And then Rashawn Melvin. He's a cornerback from Oakland. Overall, I actually think the Lions had a really, really good offseason. When you put all of these together with what they did in the draft and what they picked up, especially with Trey Flowers, huge, huge impact I think he's going to have immediately on the team. And, like Jesse James, I'm just saying, I think that they really did address some issues. They put some people together. I'd like to see them get some really, really good wide receivers for Matthew Stafford to throw through, but I think that they believe in the tight end sets, and that looks like what they're going to run. Key losses, Ezekiel Ansah. I think that's how you say his name, Ansah. He's the defensive end. He ended up going to Seattle. Nevin, this is where my handwriting comes in. Lawson, I believe. He's a cornerback. He went to Oakland. Nick Bellor, he's a fullback. He went to Seattle. I think even with the key losses, the thing is that they're probably not that great of players. The Lions, again, I think the Lions have been able to get good players on their team. I remember when they had Sue. I mean, they had this. At one point in time, you looked at their team and you were like, "Oh my gosh, this team is set up so good," and they still managed to not do much. I think this is one of those examples of a team that from the top down just is dysfunctional. There was a curse put on them back in the day, Bobby. Oh, it's going to kill me that I don't know his last name. At any rate, I think it was the 1950s was the last time that they were really, really good. And he put a curse on them saying, hey, man, for, I think he said, I don't know, like 70 years or something like that. I don't know, 60 years, 50 years, whatever the rate is, he cursed them for a little while. I'm not sure that curse has been lifted yet. I'm not a big believer in the Detroit Lions. I have made that mistake in the past. I always like to pull for these underdogs and guys to kind of get together and overcome these long-term negative seasons and try to overcome and make it to the Super Bowl, make it far into the playoffs. The Detroit Lions have burnt me all the time, and ultimately, I'm not a believer in the Lions. I'm really not. I really honestly had them ranked fourth until I started looking at it, and I was like, man, Green Bay looks terrible. Green Bay looks terrible, and I don't think that they did anything to help themselves out. So the Lions, I think, will benefit from that. Now, with that said, on paper, it looks like they did have a decent off season, and going forward in the future, it's possible that they could do something. But I'll believe it when I see it. Until that point, I will always have them at the bottom of this division, always. Third, I am going to go with the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings last year had they went 8-7-1. They had 4,036 yards passing, not terrible. 10 interceptions, 30 touchdowns. I got to be honest with you, that's more than I thought. They actually, Kirk Cousins actually performed better than I thought. I kind of laugh at Kirk Cousins a little bit, but honestly, it wasn't awful. It wasn't terrible. They allowed 3,140 with only 15 touchdowns. I also didn't realize how good their defense was. I knew that they had a good defense, but when you really start looking into the numbers and stuff like that, wow, their defense is actually really good. They allowed they had 12 interceptions that they took away. So rushing wise, they rushed 1493, not good. 9 touchdowns, very lackluster. 1,815 allowed with 13 touchdowns. So obviously, they struggle a little bit in the rushing game, but their numbers are very solid against the pass. And let's see what they did in the draft here. They did Garrett Bradbury. He's an O-lineman from NC State. I noticed that there's a lot of NC State players that got drafted. They must have been pretty good. I didn't watch as much college last year as I usually do. I kept an eye on just certain teams, but I see their names popping up all over. Just a little side note. I'm sure that this is a good offensive lineman. He's picked 18 overall. I mean, I never know what to say about these guys. Irv Smith Jr., he's a tight end out of Alabama. He's ranked 50th overall. Give him some more targets to throw to. Rudolph has not been what I thought he was going to be, and maybe they're looking for somebody to match up with him or replace him or push him for the first string tight end. Maybe he's not even a first string tight end. I wish I knew more. All right, Alexander Madison. He's a running back out of Boise State. Again, I don't know much about the kid, but they need a better run game. I know that. I definitely know that. That probably has a lot to do with their offensive lineman woes. By the way, 50 sacks, 40 allowed. Both are pretty good, pretty big numbers. 50 sacks. That's what they had. 50 sacks, 40 allowed. Again, that defense is very dominant. I'm surprised by that. Drew, 114th overall, Drew Samia. He is a guard out of Oklahoma. Again, they are definitely addressing this offensive lineman situation. They know that the offensive line sucks, so they are addressing that. 162 overall is Cameron Smith. He's an inside linebacker from USC. 190 overall. Armon Watts, he's a defensive tackle. Armon Watts, he's a defensive tackle from Arkansas. 191, Marcus Epps. He is a safety from Wyoming. They had a lot of picks, by the way. 217 overall, Chris Boyd. He's a cornerback from Texas. 239, Dylan Mitchell. He's a wide receiver from Oregon. Here's a name I recognize. I don't think he's all that great. I got to be honest with you. I was very much not impressed with Dylan Mitchell. I mean, he's okay. I'm sure he's going to be a depth chart, but I don't know. 247, Alabisi Johnson. I'm sure I wrecked that name. He's a wide receiver out of Colorado State. So they are trying to give him some people to throw to and see, obviously, depth charts there at the wide receiver. 250 overall is Austin Cutting. He's a long snapper from the Air Force. Long snapper. So kudos to them. Obviously, they still have Stefan Diggs as a wide receiver, which is really good. And they're just trying to give some depth to that wide receiver position, but mostly offensive line and then trying to add some depth onto that defense. Their free agents is Sean Marion, quarterback from the Rams, for a backup to Kirk Cousins, or at least in competition for that backup spot. Josh Klein, he's a guard from the Titans. Dan Bailey, he's the kicker, re-signed. Anthony Barr, linebacker, re-signed. Good for them to be able to maintain him. I don't know that he was their best player on their defense, but he's definitely a very solid player. And I think it was good for them to keep him. He was going to go to the Jets. I think that he had a contract signed, and then he probably stared into Gase's eyes for a second and was just like, what the F am I doing, dude? I got to go back up to Minnesota. I got to go back up there. And I lived in Minnesota for a little while. It's freaking cold as crap. So if you choose to go back to Minnesota, something scared you a little bit. And I have to think that that's looking at Gase. I think you just having like a conversation with him for like 5 minutes. He's probably like, dude, I got to get out of here. I can't do that. That guy's creepy. Really creepy. All right. Anthony Harris, he's a safety, also a re-sign. And then Shamar Stephen, defensive tackle from the Seahawks. I don't know much about him. They did quite a bit of re-signing too. Looks like it, and rightfully so. Especially defensive players, their defense performed well, and it's 50 sacks. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, it's pretty good. Key losses. Sheldon Richardson, defensive tackle that went to Cleveland. I like Sheldon Richardson. I think that they will feel his loss a little bit, although the rest of their defense is pretty good as well. So I don't know how much of a loss that's going to be. Nick Easton, he's a center. He went to the Saints. Again, I don't know much about offensive linemen. And then Latavius Murray, he's a running back who also went to the Saints. I've never really been impressed with that kid, so I don't know that that's a huge loss. I mean, you can tell by the rushing stats, although the offensive lineman could just be the biggest issue there. But they didn't have a huge running game, and so I don't think that he contributed that much. I don't think he's going to be that loss. I will say about Kirk Cousins that I don't think that he's worth the amount of money that they paid him. I didn't think he was worth that when he was in Washington. I wasn't that impressed with him. His numbers are a lot better than I thought that they were. So maybe he's a much more solid player that I kind of sleep on a little bit. But I still don't think he's worth the amount of money that they paid him. And if it wasn't for as good of a defense as they are, I wouldn't have them even this high at second. I guess I probably would, considering the other two teams that are below them. But the point is that this team is definitely built from the defensive side. If they're able to get anything going from the offensive side, this can be a very dangerous team. So we'll have to just wait and see how that goes. But I am impressed with their defense, and I have them second here. Then obviously that leads me to first place, and here I have the Chicago Bears. And it's not simply because I grew up in a Bears family and I've got a soft spot for them a little bit. It is because they earned it. They had 3,564 passing yards 14 interceptions and 28 touchdowns. And I think it's Mitch Trubisky's second year, or third year. Maybe it's a third year. Could be wrong. But I think Mitch Trubisky is probably a better quarterback than people give him credit for. I believe in Mitch Trubisky, and I think he will get better as time goes. 3,515 yards allowed with 27 interceptions. 27 interceptions. 22 touchdowns allowed. They're very good against the pass as well. Yardage is a little, 3,515 is good. So yeah, they're good against the pass. 1,938 rushing yards with 16 touchdowns, and this is where Cohen comes into play. I like their run game a lot, and this is why Trubisky doesn't need to be a superstar quarterback, and I think that takes a lot of pressure off of him and allows him to really focus on learning the game instead of having all the pressure on him, and when things start going wrong, he kind of collapses. I think this is a great way to raise up a young quarterback, is to take the pressure off by giving him a good run game. And then 1,280 rushing yards allowed with 5 touchdowns. Their defense is sick. It is ridiculous. Their defense is ridiculous. Here's also 50 sacks. Only 33 allowed. 50 sacks. This team is amazing at defense. It is so good. Khalil Mack coming over here really changed a lot. And I think that he allowed a lot of these other players to roam free and play well because they're so worried about Khalil Mack. Whatever it is that they got going for them, that defense is so fun to watch. It is an impressive team. Their run game is strong. And again, I do think Trubisky will be a good quarterback. I think whether he's ever a top-notch quarterback, he's definitely going to be a solid quarterback for a team with a good defense and a good run game. That's really all you need. That's a recipe for success right there. In the draft, they got David Montgomery, running back from Iowa State, 73rd overall. They didn't have very many draft picks. And I think that they traded up to get 73rd. Whatever the case is, they didn't need a lot on this team. They really don't. Riley Ridley, wide receiver out of Georgia at 126. At 205, Duke Shelley, cornerback from Kansas State. 222, Kareth White, running back from Florida. 238, Stephen Denmark, cornerback, Valdosta State. Valdosta State. I've actually never even heard of that college. Regardless, they didn't have much to work with in the draft. They didn't need much, fortunately for them. So basically, they went running back, wide receiver, and cornerback. That's what they went for. Adding depth to the chart. The chart's already good, so adding depth's okay. Free agency. Oh, they went 12-4. If I didn't give that stat, because I probably didn't. 12 wins, 4 losses last year. And free agency, they picked up Clinton Dix, safety from the Redskins. I don't like Clinton Dix. I've always thought he was overrated as a player, although I don't know how highly rated he was. Even coming out of college, I laughed at his name. Anyways, but Clinton Dix never really did it for me when he played in Green Bay. I always thought that he was going to be better than he was. Obviously, he went to the Redskins, and he's now on the Bears. Whatever, he's depth chart pick, I guess. I think they lost. We'll get to that. Adrian Amos, that's it. He went to the Packers. So maybe that was just kind of a replacement there, but I don't see him as being better. I don't know. He's a little bit older, and I think he's got a little experience, but never been a big fan of Clinton Dix. Cordell Patterson, wide receiver from the Pats. I actually do like this a lot. I think that he is going to add another weapon at wide receiver, and even if he doesn't, he's really good in the return game. So even if they never use him as a wide receiver and he's really just mainly there for the return, he is a guy that can get the job done there, and I think that it's a good pickup. I like it. Mike Davis, running back from Seattle. Again, probably just adding depth here and the rotation. They drafted Montgomery at 73, and I think that he'll be a solid running back. So obviously they're focusing on the run game and the defense. Again, just letting Mitch Trubisky sit back there. Don't do much to screw the game up. 14 interceptions. He could lower that a little bit, but it's not terrible. It's not awful. It's definitely not Jameis Winston numbers, I can tell you that. But yeah, I mean, again, all they need him to do is play a little solid. So, and then they also went with, let's see, Mike Davis is where I left off. Yeah, Buster Skrine, cornerback from the Jets, adding another cornerback there. Ted Larson, offensive lineman from the Dolphins. Pat O'Donnell, punter. They re-signed him. Key losses: Adrian Amos, free safety, went to the Packers. Decent player. I don't know how much they're going to miss him with their defense being as good as it is. I don't think that he makes that big of a difference. Bryce Calhoun, cornerback, went to Denver. I like Calhoun too. And again, they added a whole bunch of cornerbacks in the draft, and well, I guess 3. Maybe the cornerback took a little bit of a hit. Maybe some of these other cornerbacks aren't going to be as good. We'll have to see how that goes. Regardless, this is a team that could use that could afford to take a little bit of a hit of defense and still be a really, really good defense. Is Khalil Mack still there? Yeah. That's it. That's all you need to know. As far as then they lost Eric Kush. He's a guard. He went to Cleveland. And then Kevin White, wide receiver, that went to Arizona. Kevin White is a guy who I thought was going to be a superstar when he entered into the league. He was big, he's athletic, and he never really panned out. I don't think he never really lived up to any of their potential, so I don't know how big of a huge loss he is there. And going to Arizona, we'll see. He's going to get lost in their shuffle. He's obviously not going to be a top-notch wide receiver there at Arizona either. They have definitely better wide receivers than him on the chart. He's just a depth chart guy. I think as far as from what they added, from what they lost, it's kind of a push in my opinion there. They didn't really need to add much to it. They didn't need to change much to it. This team's 12-4. I think they could be even better next year. I'm a big believer in the Bears right now, and historically not always have I been a big believer, especially when they had old Cutler. At first, obviously, I thought he was going to be good, but after a while, like, come on now. He never cared if he was there, which is how I feel like Aaron Rodgers is a little bit of Green Bay right now. I really do. I think that Aaron Rodgers is a little bit like, I don't care. But, I got the Bears going number 1, and as a matter of fact, I probably got them in the top 2 or 3 in the NFC. I probably got them 3rd overall in the NFC, maybe even 2nd behind the Saints. I think this team very much could push to get into the Super Bowl. I'd like to see it. I'd love to see a rematch between the Colts and the Bears this year in the Super Bowl. That would be fantastic. So we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I'm a believer in the Bears at this point in time. Khalil Mack was a great pickup. He changed their game a lot. And defensively, they're a scary team to play. They are definitely a scary team. If Trubisky can put together some runs and show that he is improving as a quarterback, a lot like a Ben Roethlisberger kind of a situation where his first couple years or so, he really relied on their defense a lot to take them as far as he did. And then as time went, he ended up becoming a very good quarterback. Now he can actually lead the team. I think Mitch Trubisky has a little bit of that in him. I don't want to compare him to Big Ben. He was huge. It's not the same game style, you understand? But I do believe that Trubisky could benefit from having such a good team around him where he can sit back, focus on his game, not have to worry too much, and just change a little bit here, change a little bit here, improve a little bit here. And then after a while, if this defense breaks up and it's not as good in a couple years, maybe the run game slacks a little bit, he can pick up the slack and kind of play better as a quarterback once he has a bit of a better wide receiving core, understanding of the game. They can plan around him. So I think long term the Bears are set up to be a pretty decent team for quite a while. I don't see them being unseated by the Vikings, though it wouldn't totally shock me either. But low end on that, I think basically I believe in the Bears, and I think that they take this division and run with it. So thank you for joining me here today. Thanks for clicking on my video. Here at Colts Lane, we always take the high road, and I appreciate you guys giving me a watch. If you liked what you heard, give me a like, give me a subscribe. Look forward to seeing you guys again next time.